Hey everyone, welcome to the Tuesday, March 25th biweekly working group LTS meeting. My name is Jeremy and I'll be the host today. The agenda is in the chat for this meeting. If you joined, I'll do it one more time. If you could add yourself as an attendee, that would be great. If you have any topics that you'd like to discuss today, feel free to add them to the open discussion section. Looks like we've got one topic on the agenda right now, which is a draft proposal for an LTS subproject. And I had put Micah down because he said he would be here to talk about it. I don't see Micah though, but I do see Rita. Rita, do you want to walk us through this? I can share it on my screen if that's helpful.
I'm happy to kind of get it started, but I really hoping Micah would be here as well. Because I
Right, let
think
me
a lot of it was he has some opinions about a lot of stuff. So
okay, let me ping him again on Slack and see if he is around. Hmm. Okay, let me share my screen too. That way we can all take a look. All right, go ahead, Rita.
sure. So I think this I guess yet another proposal kind of started when I think when Canonical also announced the 12-year LTS for Kubernetes, right? Something like that. And I think there was some thoughts around, again, collectively, we're all kind of doing the same things. Would it make sense to do this as a community? Whether that could be a Kubernetes subproject or something else, that's TBD. And I think Micah started this doc thinking that it could be potentially a subproject under, I believe, Safe Arch or something like that. Uh,
Yeah, it
yep,
looks like it.
Arch, yeah. Um, and one probably a big diff from the prior proposals is uh, if this is still under a SIG as a subproject and the stakeholders are reduced from prior proposals, but still some are still required, right? And there's still a lot of questions. So we can maybe just dive into the questions maybe from the comments or whatnot. See, Antonio has questions about the dependencies, right?
Yeah, basically, you can have the Kubernetes bits, but what does does it guarantees that container is going to work, or etcd or Golang version? When I worked in the previous company that has longer support, you have to have a Golang team to patch Golang releases, and that was a lot of work. Especially because we are interested in security, right? Security fixes, and Golang is going to be just the language is a magnet for security things. And Golang is very aggressive, right? It deprecates. I don't remember every 2 years.
Right. And I think again, the thought is all of us are probably doing this already, right?
How would that work? Like for Golang, would we have a common Golang fork as well? I guess that's your question, Antonio.
Yeah, what I want to avoid is that we generate excitement and then we end with a half-baked thing and say, oh, we have this patch, but you need to use a Golang that is all right.
Mhm.
That's my gaps. Is if we move forward with this, we need to provide all these answers because there is no point in having a Kubernetes that is patched, but you're running a Golang that has security fixes, right? That's my question. I understand the doc, but I've been involved in this kind of work and all the things that are behind is a lot of work, and
Yeah,
it would be misguiding for the users to say that we have ATS and we give Justice and Golang without security fixes.
it would help to understand what patches this is talking about. Like if this is talking about patches to Kubernetes code, which, you know, every once in a while we get a CVE reported and, you know, there's a, a patch that gets emailed out and, you know, you merge to master and backported to active release branches. Like if those are the patches and we're just talking about adapting those patches to more minor branches that are already out of support, like that's a much smaller set of work and could actually be done sort of cooperatively without all of the without all the overhead. It's like, oh, well, in addition to the patches that we'll merge to our active release branches, we'll also make sure we have versions of them that don't conflict, you know, back a few more minors. Like that's sort of the minimum viable thing I could imagine. And like Rita said, that's us. We're doing that similarly, you know, each in our own branches we're maintaining. So if we wanted to cooperate on coming up with non-conflicting backports a few more minors back, maybe that could work. That's like the lightest weight version possible, where there's no test infra, there's no, all these dependencies and things like aren't even being considered. It's just, here's the Kubernetes code and we need to patch it, so we'll make patch sets back a few more minors. That's at one end of the spectrum. That doesn't, like, maybe that would reduce a little bit of work, you know, help us share resources a little bit. But it's hard for me to see a lot of value in that. Like taking a patch, a security patch, and bringing back another minor, like that's not usually that hard. At the other end of the spectrum is we're going to have something with like forked Golang and every dependency will be bumping and we'll be reacting to, and we're going to run test infra and like, and that seems like a huge amount of work that I don't really think the project can sustain. Like I think the project is already at its limit sort of in terms of like sustaining release and maintenance stuff. And so I'm struggling to see exactly what this is proposing, first of all. Like when it says backporting patches, like which end of the spectrum is it envisioning? Do you know? I get, is Micah here would be helpful.
Well, I think
that as well.
Yeah, he is not here. I will try my best to represent, but I think again, I think when we first started, to your point, the MVP, the bare minimum would be the Kubernetes CVEs, right? But I think as you start looking at it closely, every vendor is basically doing the backporting for all the relevant dependencies as well. And especially with Canonical doing this for 12 years, the thought was, could we work on the backporting together? Because we are all doing it anyway. But
well,
to your
we're
point,
not all doing it for 12 years.
no, not 12 years, for sure. For sure. Definitely not. But yeah, I totally hear you about the testing and also getting approvers for different SIGs.
So my view of the testing is even if we do the testing centrally, we all still have to have our own testing downstream as well. So I don't think we're actually saving. It's not like we would turn off our tests. We're like, oh, upstream tested, you know, back a couple more minors. We don't even need to test. Like we still have to test. So having a hard time seeing what it's saving. It seems like more cost for the open source project and doesn't eliminate the cost for everyone who's then consuming those things.
Scott, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think as the Go backwards compatibility stuff has become more widely used, we're seeing like libraries don't even try to support anything except for the currently supported Go versions. Would we be willing to continue the Golang updates in this fork as a way to like, so that we don't have to fork Go, but we just continue doing the, the update to the latest version of Go in this fork instead? Because I think like what we're seeing at Red Hat is all the libraries now that backwards compatibility has become fairly robust. Nobody's maintaining anything except for like a master branch of their libraries. So they just expect everyone to continuously update to the latest version of Go.
We have cases where Golang breaks, right?
I mean, it certainly happens. They treat that as a regression and are pretty good about fixing the break. So, I mean, it happens, but when we find it and report it, they.
I mean, break behavior, just the Windows thing with the scene links. Eventually, that behavior will no longer be there. So that
Yeah, so Go
will
has
not
like a 2-year timer, or like they promise to keep runtime compatibility for 2 years, which easily covers the current open source window of 14 months, and basically covers like the 2-year LTS windows from most of the providers. It definitely doesn't cover like a 5-year or a 12-year window. And the 2-year promise from Go is like a minimum. I think if there was feedback that a particular option was difficult or disruptive, I've seen them be pretty responsive to keeping it around longer or even indefinitely. So
yeah, but my question is out of the window, Jordan. What happens? What happens if we end with one of these out of the window thing and we have this LTS broken for 3 years?
that's why I think we can't let the LTS window go longer than our core dependencies that we don't have a viable way to maintain. I'm talking a lot, but I don't see any other hands, so I will ask
Yeah,
my
go for it.
next question. The consolidate code ownership and change approvals. I think one of the reasons our project has been so successful is because we have distributed ownership, and there are like deep rabbit holes and sort of complicated components. And some of the areas where we see vulnerabilities are some of the most complicated areas, like storage or node or like API machinery proxies. I'm really skeptical of like consolidating ownership of backports of twisty, complicated fixes under like SIG Arch. Like I think in reality, we would have to be pulling in like the TLs and reviewers and approvers from every random SIG to be reviewing these changes. And so it feels weird to say like, oh, we're going to consolidate this under like SIG Arch. And actually, I think SIG release is probably a more accurate. Like the SIG release is more involved in Go bumps and like release branch management. So it feels more natural to say SIG release, but they don't have the review expertise. So consolidating, but then in practice saying, but every time there's an actual patch, we're going to be like roping in TLs from here and there and to do the reviews. That doesn't feel like consolidation. That feels like agreeing to something centrally, but then when the work actually has to be done, still like making distributed people do the work. I just have a hard time seeing how that would actually work practically. So I guess I question like consolidation of code ownership as a goal, and I sort of question like the SIG art targeting instead of SIG release.
Release isn't even a stakeholder on this proposal.
Yeah, which I don't like the SIG that helps with the go bumps and helps with release branch management, like that's SIG release.
Yeah, that.
But even there, it's still like they're coordinating, but area owners are the ones responsible for doing the backports and deconflicting the backports and reviewing and approving the backports. Like SIG release coordinates, but they don't like they're not on the hook for maintaining these components in release branches. The SIG owners are.
I'm reading this. I think maybe what Micah was saying, his thinking was that the sub project would be responsible for tagging, like basically relieve the burden from from SIG release. I think that was like one of the concerns, right? Is how can we reduce the burden for all the SIGs, essentially?
Okay, go ahead. You have your hand. I'm sure you have good things to say.
That SIG docs ownership section down there is actually also a release team ownership item. SIG docs is not responsible for burning down old versions of the docs. When we stop supporting a version, release docs is. So that is a request for a change to the release docs handbook. I've been sent by SIG docs to argue.
I guess I don't see how this relieves ownership for various SIGs. Like if SIG release folks aren't the ones like tagging, you know, okay to merge, and it's like SIG Arch or someone, I don't know. But who actually makes the change? Like who opens the PR and like deconflicts the PR and rewrites the PR if the area has changed since that minor? It still is going to have to be like the storage folks or the API machinery folks or the whoever.
Yeah, I don't see Micah, so maybe
I'm
we should just postpone this. Yeah, because I don't think I'm representing him well enough. But I think at a very high level, I think his thought was not having to require all the SIGs to do the reviews and approval. That's why you don't see them in the key stakeholders.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, I get your concern. Yeah.
Like there's two flavors of backports. There's ones that are trivial, right? Where it just backported with no conflicts and it was trivial. And if it's trivial, then I don't see the value this is providing. We can all just like cherry pick it one more release back and it's trivial. And then there's the ones where it's complicated and you have to deconflict and you have to rewrite and you have to like, it's subtle and complicated and hard. And when it's subtle and complicated and hard, like SIG Arch central approvers aren't going to know how to do that. It's going to be back on the originating SIG to do the rewrite. Anyway, yeah, there are other hands. Go ahead.
Antonio, go ahead.
I'm going to switch a bit the topic, so if the question is related, please jump, Zachary. Is your question related to what Jordan and Kat were talking?
I'll let you go first.
Okay, so my question is, it was mentioned several times during the meeting that Canonical was a big influence on triggering this proposal. Do we have anybody from Canonical on the call?
Oh yes, I'm from Canonical.
Okay, so it will be interesting to know more your perspective, because you are, saying that you are going to maintain this for 10 years. So maybe you can have some secret sauce that we are not aware that can make this simpler.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm just one of the engineers, and I'm not sure how much of our stuff we already I can
I don't want to put you in the
model.
So
Maybe we need to wait for Kos, like last time. Konstantinos was basically presenting that or discussing that. So he's out today, but I guess next time he will also join.
Antonio, I don't think you were on the call last time. We basically spent the whole meeting going back. There was like a presentation and question and answer, and so you might want to watch the recording from last time. There was a lot of good about the details on the canonical side.
I will do that. Sorry.
Okay, Zach, and then Rita.
Yeah, I think, Antonio, I think you were going kind of in the same direction I was thinking, which is, I feel like I haven't talked to Micah about the doc, but reading it, I felt like because it started with this motivation section that talks about how there's 4 or 6 people solving this problem already. And I think those 4 or 6 people solve it without involving every single SIG. Maybe that was why Micah was thinking that this could be some centralized sub-project separate from the reviewer expertise. Like, how do those 6 companies today handle those complicated backports?
I think we do it unilaterally, and so that maybe that's the challenge, is like getting the 6 of us to agree on everything. Even if it's consolidated in the 6 of us, I'm not sure we'll always agree, but I don't know how contentious these would be.
Go for it, Rita.
Yeah, just kind of chime in on the canonical piece, right? I think one of the thoughts was I think Canonical is known for continuously backporting things for long-term support, right? So things like Golang or SC that the project depends on, each one of us may not necessarily be doing that kind of backporting, but in the event that we do need to, I think this is where Canonical brings a lot of value. And if this is a community thing, I think there's more incentive for Canonical to also be part of the community and contribute that way. And that could potentially be valuable to not just the 6 distributors, but more people in who's trying to do the same thing. So that was kind of one of the incentives.
Jordan, and then Zach again.
Yeah, in terms of like what individual vendors with longer support periods are doing, I think one of the goals has been to make the sort of normal bumps, like Go bumps, be pretty trivial and complicated, so that you can just bump the Go version you're building with. I know different vendors do different things. So some bump Go versions, some maintain patched Go versions. And so that's like a difference. There's pros and cons to each approach. And so if you were going to sort of combine all of those into like a shared older branches, like those 2 approaches don't work together. Like you have to decide, are you going to build this old branch with an old Go version that you're patching, or are you going to build it with like an updated Go version that requires changes in the Kubernetes code or Go mod files or whatever. For complicated backports, I'll speak for myself and like the way we try to do things in GKE. Like we try to minimize the time period that we are extending support beyond open source. So I think it's like 10 months, 12 months, something like that. Try to minimize that instead of going for years and years. And then like as they arise, by minimizing that, ideally when there is a security backport, like the code is still like pretty similar to the oldest branch from open source. That when a rewrite is required, that one narrow scenario seems like the most useful place for this in terms of shared resources. And so that's why I was at like my question, what types of patches are we talking about taking back? if we wanted to start, if there was interest, if we wanted to start with that, like when there's a Kubernetes CVE, and we release patches, if we can get volunteers to like help rewrite those for like 2 or 3 more minor versions back and just have the patches sitting there, like I wouldn't say no to that. It's kind of a best effort commitment. If it happens, great. It saves you some work. If it doesn't happen, like, okay, you have to go do the work you were going to do anyway. Without committing to like, we're also going to bump Go versions, and we're also going to bump dependencies, and we're also going to do test info, and we're also going to cut release tags, and we're also going to do all these things. Like just collaborating on backporting, rewriting, deconflicting more complicated patches, that seems like it might be a possible lightweight place to start.
Would those just be sent to the distributors list and not applied to the end of life release branches?
I mean, at the point where the patches are public and like backported to release branches, like having the patch sets also be public, you know, we applied them back to 129 or whatever the current minor is, but also here's like one that'll apply to 128, 127 cleanly. Like we're not going to merge them, we're not going to run CI on them, but like the same people who helped backport to 129 and up work for employers who have to maintain 127 and 128 branches. So we work together, and like here's a patch. You can apply it to your branch if you want.
I just meant, would we make those available as like a cherry pick PR that doesn't merge, so people could grab it if they wanted to?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I would expect so.
Okay.
Yeah, like when the patches are public, like having patch sets that are also public. Yeah, I would think so.
Zach, go ahead.
So kind of, I feel like we're circling in on an interesting set of work to collaborate on. But this work to me sounds a lot like coordination work under a security umbrella. If that were the focus, where would the right place for the project to live be?
Probably under the SRC for coordination purposes.
Yeah, I was just thinking because today we asked the fixed team, right, to provide patches for all the supported versions anyway. So this could be perhaps a nice follow-up to that. Meaning if you're a vendor and you care about this and you want to backport it, PR and then we'll review it, right? Like, but I think just as a PR, I think it's a good first step. But like how the fact that we're not merging it, or how do we know it's working, or how do we know what's the right amount of approval, to make sure it's useful, right? But the reason why I also raised my hand is I think this is like what you're suggesting, Jordan, is I think a good first step. But I think what inspired this proposal again came from, hey, Canonical is doing this and they're really good at maintaining the backward stuff. How can we get them to work with us and leverage the work that they're doing anyway? And potentially deal with some of the hard backportings.
From some of the discussion from last time, sounded like it wasn't, well, I wasn't super clear on whether some of the hard issues around backporting were fully fleshed out in the Canonical offering. I think the questions about like what about Go? What, are you just building with old versions of Go that are patched? Or there were some open questions about those things that didn't, it wasn't clear that it was a fully solved problem. And just speaking from personal experience, I'm somewhat skeptical about like complicated Kubernetes code security fixes being feasible to backport for years and years and years and years. So I I will watch with interest, and I hope it goes well, but I don't actually think it's a great idea to try to maintain release branches for that long, like with community staffing promises. I just have a hard time seeing that working well.
Mo, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to play devil's advocate just a little bit. If Red Hat can do this for RHEL and Canonical can do this for Ubuntu, why can't someone else do it for Kubernetes? I think the problem statement for Linux is actually far harder because C is a far worse language to do anything reasonable in.
But those companies you mentioned, it's their business, right? And they have whole teams to work on that.
Right. But
So
that's what I'm
that's-
saying. It's like if I don't, I think what I'm pushing back against is that we actually need like SIG leads and stuff to like make sure we do it correctly. Like obviously over time expertise has diffused through the Linux ecosystem such that you don't need to like drag in like every what's the term in Linux? Is it like component? I can't remember how the Linux kernel.
Right, but this is proposing that the Kubernetes project do this. And so within the Kubernetes project, the right people to be doing this are the SIG leads. Like when there's like a complicated, subtle thing with a component, like within the Kubernetes project, there's no one better equipped to understand and oversee subtle, complicated changes to a component than the SIG lead, TL, some project owner, whoever, over that thing.
Yeah, so let me like, so again, Micah's not here, so I can't necessarily speak to exactly what he felt like. I think in my head, the correct framing from this, or at least what I understand the proposal to try to do, I think the correct ownership of such a proposal is not the Kubernetes project. I think the correct ownership of such a proposal is CNCF. Just like they have K3S and various other things under their umbrella that is outside of core Kubernetes and is not managed or maintained by the folks on this call. I think that's actually the better place for this. And I think it would be completely detached and funded by CNCF. And that would really just be CNCF being the governing body so that when it's time for us to argue about, hey, are we supposed to backport Go? Or are we supposed to use bumped Go or whatever? We have a way to break any ties or whatever. But I think that would be a far more useful organizational structure than trying to shove it into our SIG structure.
Antonio and then Jordan. Oh, if you have more to say, Mo, go ahead.
I was gonna say when it's time to backport something crazy, it's on us to whoever's on that bucket. They get to go figure it out. You don't go bother any SIG TLs or anything about it. I mean, you can back channel with them, I guess, if you have relationships, but it's not on any Kubernetes SIG to help you. It's not the same project. In the same way that if K3S has an issue, it's not our problem.
Well, it's open source, right? It's not that it's on you to help, but if you are a SIG TL and something happened in a branch that is you are the TL and I mean you kind of feel obligated, right? So that's I think that's the slippery slope of putting this into Kubernetes itself. You are creating a hard dependency on the people that is already maybe not looking for more hard dependencies.
Jordan, go ahead.
it seems super strange to say like something else under CNCF would be responsible for like support windows and policies and stuff around the Kubernetes project, and it wouldn't be the Kubernetes project. Like that feels really incoherent to me. Like people responsible for figuring out, okay, what's the support window? How do upgrades work? What's supported SKU? Like, what are our dependencies? How are we maintaining compatibility with Go and Containerd and whatever else? And then to say like, that's cool, you all do that. Then separately, we're gonna have this other group that's like gonna extend that support for longer and like oversee approving changes to old release branches. That seems even weirder than like hoisting it from SIG leads to like SIG Arch or SIG release or something. It's like the further away you get from the people who actually understand how this stuff works, the less likely this is to be successful. That feels like a really weird relationship where CNCF is doing one thing and Kubernetes project is doing another thing. Like, I don't understand that.
Rita and then Zach.
Yeah, I hear you, Jordan. I think it's like even when I'm listening, right? It's like it's almost like we're trying to balance between reducing the burden for the sake like the TLs, but at the same time we want to get their expertise on the really complex backportings or certain policies, right? So how can we juggle these two things? Because they're conflicting in a lot of sense, right? But there is a world where people want to leverage the backports, right? And work together. So, but then we don't want to burden the TLs, but then we do sometimes.
It feels like we're saying we need that expertise, but we can't count on having the bandwidth there. And so,
Well, I think we need the expertise for the really complex ones, but for the simple stuff, do we need to bother them, or do we need to bother the release team since they're already fully, underwater, right? So
well,
I don't know. I think this proposal is trying to provide value, but not like burden people who are already like really stretched, right?
even the simple stuff takes a lot of effort. So like even Go bumps, which are
Sure.
generally simple and not dramatic, take a lot of effort. And the place in the project where that work is done is stretched thin. And so if we're saying like, oh, there's lots of energy and effort, and, interest in expanding that work, I would like to see evidence of that by funding and staffing the area of the project that does that work. Like if we're saying, oh, we can do dependency updates and Go bumps on more branches and run CI on more branches and cut tags on more branches, and we can totally staff that. Like there's interest and excitement in the community to do that. It's like, well, let's see that manifest by like shoring up the areas of the project that are stretched thin and understaffed and underfunded or like at capacity, rather than saying we're going to do it in some new area we're going to spin up and we promise this will be like staffed and funded and like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think this is where it's tricky, right? Because I can see there could be more incentive to fund those areas if those areas are the means to get the extended support. But right now we're not committing to that, right, as a community. So, but that's where, in my opinion, that's where perhaps where the funding comes from. So,
Good.
right, like so if we can say, hey, this is really we're really stretched thin with release and backporting and all of this stuff, but hey, these are also going to be used for extended support, then that's much easier to convince.
I think the more official you make the promises, the more comprehensive the solution has to be. And like the fan out to the Go version and the containerd version and like all the dependencies. Like it's weird for a project to say we're going to support this one artifact or this one branch for another 6 months or 9 months or year. And oh, by the way, the things connected to it are like not supported. So you can't actually use it unless you also go solve these other problems. That's sort of why we ended
where
up
the
with like
balance comes in, right? Is, as you said, you can't make it too long. You can't extend it too long. Otherwise, all the dependencies are, there's more work to do because we now need to support all the backport all the dependencies. So this is where the project, in my opinion, this is where the project has to kind of draw a good balance between what do people want and how do we get support for those things. Meanwhile, put our foot down and say, no, this is as far as we can go.
And my perspective is that we're kind of there. Like the project, I think, is at that point now, and the vendors that are going beyond that are taking on pretty significant burden to handle that fan out and deal with the complicated, gnarly stuff when it comes up. Zach has been very patiently waiting. I'll shut up now.
It's okay. You set up my comment perfectly. So on one hand, I see the value in having the LTS work live as close as possible to the area of expertise. But Jordan, to your point, there are people doing it successfully today that are sort of as far from that area of expertise as possible. It's happening internally at various vendors. And if I think of it as a spectrum, at like one end of the spectrum, you've got owning it in the SIG that has the expertise. At the other end, you've got it like owning it internally at multiple different companies. Everything else is on the spectrum. Like a sub project under SIG Arch or SIG Release feels, or SRC feels like closer to the project. A different project under CNCF seems farther from the project, but still closer to the project than 6 different companies. And to Rita's point, the funding goes into each vendor's own fork. If those vendors were each able to take 50% of the funding that they spend on their own fork and put it towards a shared fork, maybe everybody wins.
Yeah, and then Antonio.
Hello, I was sent on behalf of SIGDocs. Our opinion is that we're getting like, this proposal is getting very close to the Kubernetes project just supporting versions for longer. So like, is that what's happening here? Because that's what it looks like is happening here. Or getting really, really close to it, especially with respect to maintaining the docs branches for another year. I feel like when this proposal was written, it was written by somebody who has had no involvement in SIGDocs. We don't maintain old docs branches at all. Like the docs branch from the previous cycle or the previous version, we don't maintain that. It just sits there. If somebody wants to make an update for a critical change, we'll review that PR, but we do not maintain old docs branches. And if we're talking about adding a whole nother year or 2 or 3 or 12 of hosting old docs branches, those are going to get so stale to the point of being useless or actively misleading very, very quickly. And SIGDocs straight up does not have anywhere near the support it needs to be actively maintaining even like current branches. We certainly can't do it for another year of them. Like it's just not a thing that we can support. We barely make it by with what we have. So what are y'all actually asking for with the need to maintain docs branches for an additional year thing? Because we can just stop burning down old branches. Currently we remove them from the website after a release. We only keep the last 3. So we can stop doing that and keep the old ones online with a warning that this is an unmaintained branch that like LTS docs are use at your own risk, but that feels bad. But it's our only option with our current resources. And officially the opinion of SIGDocs is that we don't like this whole proposal as it exists, because it feels like it's too close to just supporting another year or 3 of versions of Kubernetes directly instead of the companies making money off of LTS doing it themselves. So, Rita, do you know what was meant by maintain docs branches for an additional year? Because we're not maintaining them.
Yeah, I think actually this is definitely Micah, because I think in all the prior proposal we didn't mention docs. In fact, I think that was always like out of like a non-goal, I think.
Okay.
So this might be just this proposal.
Okay.
Happy to add it. I'll make the change in the proposal.
Okay. But as a SIGDocs tech lead, I have to say that I also do not love the idea of us like semi-supporting older versions and having bad or non-existent documentation for them. That's not in line with our philosophy as a SIG or as a project with respect to documentation. So like if the versions exist semi-supported by us as a project, the docs have to be there in some shape or form, but we can't be making active changes to them. We don't have the resources for it.
Antonio, you're next.
I was trying to clarify. I think that we are making some assumptions on everybody has the forks with the same content, and I'm pretty sure I cannot. I'm pretty sure that all this fork has a lot of code that is completely incompatible with anybody else. And in the other thing is, it's not the same to support all releases with something like KIME. I was checking now, Ben has until 124, that with distros that require to run 1000 nodes or something like that. It's pretty different complexity. Right? The support that you need for small environments, IoT environments, these kind of things, is minimal. So I don't think that it can be magic as, oh, let's put all these secret branches together. I'm completely sure that is not going to work.
Jordan, and we have 10 minutes left.
I look forward to having this discussion again when Micah can join us. I agree with Kat that this feels way too close to the project will support more miners. Again, if we come back to like what could be like a core shared task that would actually benefit folks who are doing work independently, I keep coming back to when there is a particular patch for a particular issue that did require like some rewrite. That's a thing that multiple of us are handling on our own. If we collaborate on that particular patch and just post the patch set. So like, here's this, for this CVE, this area changed a lot, this patch required a rewrite. Here's a patch. Like, we're not going to apply it. We're not going to run project CI on it. That's a lot clearer that like, it's just a patch set. If you're maintaining your own branches, here's a patch set that might save you some time. Like, that's a lot, you don't need docs branches for that. You don't need CI for that. We're all running CI on our own branches that we're maintaining. And we can't stop doing that just because the project was going to do that. That's a lot smaller of an initial step. I think it might actually save some time if we collaborate on that. And it's a lot clearer that this is just like a best effort, occasional, when there's a gnarly rewrite, here you go. If it helps you, great. But the project is not supporting more miners. I wouldn't mind if we found a way, attach it to the issue, the CVE issue that SRC populates, or if we even had a SIGs repo that held these patch sets that we could point to. Like that would be fine. I don't care, but it's a lot clearer that the project is not taking on like consistent promised support for more miners for everything.
Zach, go ahead.
So is there an existing proposal, Jordan, that kind of summarizes what that would be? Or is that a proposal that would be worth writing?
I don't think there's an existing proposal. I couldn't tell if this was that proposal. The first goal was like, shared patches. I'm like, oh, maybe that's what this is. And then the more I read, it's like, no, this is a lot more, I think. So if we wanted to pare this down or propose an alternative to this, SRC would seem like a much more natural home because they're doing the coordination anyway. Yeah, I could see that as an like a pared down alternative to this.
I added to your proposal at the bottom under open question just to record this, but not like mix it yet. And then just to clarify, right, like you're still thinking that we would still get SIG-TLs to review and help with the
Yeah, if you can,
Yeah.
like the fix team that's doing the fixes, like if they have bandwidth, often the people on the fix team are also working for companies that are
Same.
maintaining branches. Like, so often there is alignment and they are going to have to do that work anyway. And when they can, that's great. Like if the SIG-TL doesn't have bandwidth for it and is like, I don't have any need for this on these older branches and it's really complicated and I don't have time to work on this, then like they're not obligated to. So it's a best effort thing. And then we can see how it goes. Like if other people step up, companies or maintainers or vendors that are maintaining branches step up and like contribute it. There's already back and forth on the distributor list for like, here's a patch and you'll get feedback like, oh, we ran this through our tests and we found this edge case and we revised the patch. Like there's back and forth like that happens today. We could see how it goes. Like if people who are doing stuff downstream want to kick that back up and say, here's our backport to 127. And someone was like, yep, we did the same thing and it works for us. Like, I'm happy to take that work and use it and publish it somewhere. But we just have to make it clear, like, this is not a promise that every CVE is going to come with fixes back 3 more miners that have been vetted and tested and CI approved and merged and like whatever by the project. We can't promise that.
All right, we are almost out of time. I think it would be interesting to maybe explore that proposal a little bit more next time. Do we want to try to document that in a little bit more formal than a bullet point here?
Yeah, but where would you even document this? Where does it go?
Probably just another doc that people can comment on that we can share before the next meeting.
Oh no, I was more thinking like if this were something we want to do, like where would you even document something like this?
I mean, in the SRC playbook for like what do we do when we have an issue we're working at patches for? It's like a question. Does this backport cleanly more miners? Are the people involved in the fix, invested in getting it working on older miners? If so, then collect those and post them here, like attachment to the issue or a directory in a repo or like. So just like if it's warranted and if the people to do the work show up, where do we stick it? And then it becomes like a per issue thing. Like for this CVE, there are patches available for older miners if you want them. Here they are. And if the work doesn't show up or is not applicable, or there's nobody to staff it for a particular issue, then we don't post the links there. We only fixed it in the active branches.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I can summarize this in a different proposal or something like that, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, everyone, for all the feedback. And Micah, you owe me one.
Thank you for representing. We'll go give Mike a hard time.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.